Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, it's the row that simply won't go away. In fact, it's the row that's been there ever since Jeremy Corbyn first became leader of the Labour Party. Remember Shami Chakrabarti doing that big investigation into Labour and whether it had a problem with anti-Semitism, and that started back at the end of 2015. She, of course, for her efforts, finished up in the House of Lords. But it's got worse lately. We've debated it this week. Now we're told that Jeremy Corbyn is rumoured to be on the verge of making a pretty humiliating climb down on anti-Semitism by backing the internationally recognised definition in full. What is it I'm talking about? Well, it is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and they have a definition. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and all their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. That's the definition, and there are 11 examples of the IHRA layout of what they would define as anti-Semitism. Now, again and again and again, there's been pressure on Corbyn and Labour to accept this definition. He has been deeply reluctant to do so, but we're told now that he will, and that this will probably happen at the party's next meeting of its National Executive Committee on the 4th of September. And the timing of that is quite important because on the 5th of September, Labour MPs are going to have a meeting of the Parliamentary Labour Group where they're going to vote on whether to accept this definition or not. And my guess is that Labour MPs would vote to accept this definition because a lot of them know that this row, and particularly the last week with the Palestinian Martyrs Cemetery, the laying of a wreath, and Corbyn 1 minute saying he was there but he wasn't really part of it, and then admitting that he was. And, Labour MPs will know that actually in Middle England and Middle Wales and Middle Scotland, this is not going down well at all. So let's assume, shall we, that Corbyn goes to the NEC, accepts this definition. It is then backed overwhelmingly by the party's MPs. Would that then, do you think, put the matter to bed? And if you think, yep, provided they do this, my faith in Labour and Corbyn will be fully restored. If that's how you feel about it, call me on 0345 6060 973, or maybe you think it's too late. The damage is already done. If that's how you feel, text to 84850, and maybe you think actually there are probably more of these nasty stories to come anyway. Maybe they ought to really be thinking about someone different to lead them. Knowing, of course, that the Labour members back Corbyn. If that's how you feel, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and you could, of course, as ever, watch me on Facebook and comment there too. So clearly, the pressure now getting to Corbyn, The Guardian hinting very strongly that he's going to make this climb down. It will be pretty humiliating because he has steadfastly not wanted to do so. But would this solve the problem? And given the terrible arguments that are going on about Brexit within the Conservative Party and increasing rumours that MPs may well oust the PM. There's a Tory conference coming up. Boris, we're here today, is going to be speaking at fringe meetings. Given all of the Tories' problems, surely the one thing Labour need to be right now is united. Would this make them united? Let's go to Charlie in Clapham, a new caller to this show. Charlie, good evening.
Hello. I think it's a step in the right direction, but it's by no means going to solve the problem. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is that so many of the far left and the extreme left in the Labour Party are wedded to Marxist doctrine. Now, Marx, as you know, was a Jew, but he was also, although the word hadn't been invented then, he was also very critical of Jews, believing them to be at the heart of capitalism, and the extreme left hate capitalism and they hate Jews as a consequence.
It's the old theory, Charlie, isn't it?
I don't know how old it is, but to me it's what I always sticks in my mind. I think that anti-Semitism is there in the extreme left of the Labour Party, and the extreme left of the Labour Party at the moment are in control. And until there's a move back to centre-left, at least, we will always have anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.
Charlie, I completely get the logic of what you're saying, but how does the Labour Party get back to being centre-left, given that all these £3 members that Ed Miliband encouraged to join, a vast majority of them appear to be completely behind Corbyn. They see this whole thing as being a sort of Daily Mail-inspired media conspiracy. The Labour Party's not going to change in the short term, Charlie, is it?
It's not going to change in the short term, I'm afraid. I think progress is being made. You might say that it's people of bad faith on the right who are digging up stories involving Corbyn. Corbyn is always a supporter of, whether it's violent or non-violent, he wants capitalism wherever he sees it overthrown. He wants a kind of pseudo-Marxist government, wherever it is in the world. He doesn't mind if they're gun-toting revolutionists or whether there's some other kind of a method to gain control. But he will always support.
Charlie, can I ask you, have you been a Labour supporter and voter?
I am a Labour supporter. But and I have voted for Corbyn, but I hadn't realised, to be perfectly candid with you, just how often he had damaged himself and the Labour Party by his support for these extreme left movements. And
isn't there the real danger, Charlie, that even if they adopt this definition, that actually over the course of the next months, more and more of these stories emerge?
I'm afraid that's true. And to answer your question, Nigel, which is, I suppose, at the centre of tonight's agenda, how will we move back to the centre or centre-left? I fear it will only be after a thorough defeat at an election with Corbyn.
Charlie, I agree with that 100%. I think you're right. They're not going to shift. They're not going to move anytime soon. And even adopting this definition will be seen, in my opinion, as too little, too late. Charlie, thank you very much indeed for your call. In my opinion, there now will always be a question mark over Corbyn. I think he's let things go too far, I get by text. I also get from Simon on the Isle of Man, as a son of 2 Holocaust survivors, I will not forgive Mr Corbyn until he confronts his grim past and apologises sincerely and unreservedly to all terror victims for his disgraceful associations. Well, we talked about a climb down in terms of accepting the IHRA definition. I don't think he's going to go much further than that. Corbyn's platforming with terror groups can never be put right. The party can now move on, but not with him, says Graham. Let's stay in Clapham and let's ask James what he thinks of it all. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. Nigel, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to make no apparent difference to me whatsoever if he accepts the definition or not, because he is being forced to accept the definition. He's not doing it free willingly. He is being forced. And what he said, that he was there to go and represent all the people that died, he specifically put his wreath on the people that died in Tunisia when the Israelis attacked it. But I didn't see him popping over to Israel to put a golden wreath on the Israeli athletes that got murdered in Munich. So he's a hypocrite. He's been forced to do this. And as far as I'm concerned, the Labour Party is dead in my eyes.
Yeah, and James, again, have you been somebody that in the past has supported Labour?
I was a member of the Labour Party.
Oh, right. OK. And when did you cease to be a member?
About 6 months ago.
Right, and is that because you've just given up with this ongoing unpleasantness?
Well, I've had enough of it now, and there was a by-election for the council.
Because you've just given up with this ongoing unpleasantness?
Well, I've had enough of it now, and there was a by-election for the council, and they sent over the usual email, and I replied back to them, and I said, I'd rather gnaw my hand off than vote for you again. Wow.
And how long were you a member for?
Me, I've been a member since I was 18, so it's a good 25 years.
Wow. So for you, I mean, you must be actually genuinely upset then what's happening to your party.
When I look at the examples of what the Labour Party is, and as far as I'm concerned, it is just the cabal which is inside of London. The Labour Party is disintegrating outside of London, whether Mr Corbyn and the rest of his acolytes will accept it. Outside of London, you are a laughing stock, as you quite rightly put it, Nigel. Middle England, Middle Wales, Middle Northern Ireland.
That's my feeling on it, James.
Looking at you and going, you are a disgrace. We want nothing to do with you, and we'll wipe our hands of you.
Yeah. James, that's a very, very powerful call. Thank you very much indeed. Well, James there, 25 years a Labour member, left 6 months ago, and both of our last 2 callers, just cannot get on with this Labour Party with Corbyn in charge, and neither see any prospect of it changing. All the while, he is still the leader, even if on September the 4th, they accept this definition. And he is being forced into this, because wouldn't it be humiliating if his own MPs on the 5th of September voted a different way? And I guess he kind of knows that's what they're going to do. What does David in Addington make of all of this? Good evening.
Evening, Nigel. Yes, I cannot, one thing, stand Corbyn. I think he's a wimp. I think he's a man with no backbone. And I think all that flip-flopping the other day on whether he was there or whether he took part and all that was nonsense and showed that he has no backbone and shows that he should not be a leader. That's number one. But on this, I thoroughly agree with him. He is a man whose principle is to follow the rule of law. He was there at that ceremony because on both sides, whether it was terrorists hijacking human beings on a plane and then shooting some of them, or whether it was the other side bombing civilian targets, which is a war crime, he was there for both sides and has been throughout his career. Whether it be mostly for Palestine, he's supported Palestine because there's probably been more war crimes carried out on the other side. But I think he's always been there as a man who accepts the rule of international law, which, let's say, the other side, Theresa May and what's his name, Boris Johnson, do not accept the rule of international law.
But when David, when he's asked, would he condemn the IRA, he sort of tries to condemn the British Army's behaviour in Northern Ireland. I mean, I'm not so sure in siding with the IRA the way that he has consistently over the years that he's respected the rule of law.
Well, no, but he's always look at Nelson Mandela. He's always respected the right of someone to stand up for their rights in some respect or another. But but yet he's not had the conviction, especially in this case, to stand up and say what he absolutely believes in. He's not a conviction leader.
And David, he has chosen his friends very, very poorly, hasn't he?
Well. No, not necessarily. He's been invited to these things. He's gone along as a peace man of peace, and he's gone along as a man who wants to, as he said,
All right, David.
Both sides.
David,
all crimes on either side.
I accept the point you've made. I don't necessarily agree with it. I thank you. In a minute, we'll talk a little bit more about Jeremy Corbyn and that ceremony that he attended and some of the people he was actually there with. But for now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it is 7:15. So one of the people Jeremy Corbyn was standing next to in that cemetery in Tunisia, the Palestinian Martyrs Cemetery, has been highlighted by today's Times newspaper, not the Daily Mail, but the Times today, and named as Maher al-Taha, leader in exile of the proscribed Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP, which is an outright overtly terrorist organisation which has murdered people, including Rabbi Avraham Goldberg, a British rabbi who was murdered in one of their attacks. And it's all well and good, folks. You can ring me up and say that Corbyn's very principled, that Corbyn respects international law. I've had those comments tonight. But I'm saying to you that I think he's chosen his friends very, very poorly indeed. And I don't think any of this goes away. I suspect what we'll find are even more of these events and meetings that he's attended with people who are outright appalling. And Dame Margaret Hodge, who, as you know, has been very critical of Corbyn and is open to now a Labour Party investigation into her behaviour. She has been on Sky News in the last few minutes. This is what she said.
It's a very fine line between being pro-Palestinian, the Palestinian cause, which he's always believed in, and being anti-Semitic. And I think he's gone the wrong side of that line.
Well, there we are. He's the wrong side of the line as far as Dame Margaret Hodge is concerned. She went on to say that the cult of Corbynism has allowed anti-Semitic attitudes to emerge. She also felt the same fear her father would have felt when he was fleeing Nazi Germany when she found out Labour had opened up disciplinary proceedings against her. I don't know whether that's quite the wisest comment, but that is what she said. But on the other side, Len McCluskey, he likes a good punch-up, doesn't he? And he has hit out at what he calls the intransigent hostility of the Jewish community leaders in this dispute. He says, I am at a loss to understand the motives of the leadership of the Jewish community. Are you really, Len? Are you really at a loss to understand their motives? Not even 3/4 of a century on from the appalling things that happen to them. I'm not at a loss to understand it at all. I'm stunned that you are. And McCluskey goes on to have a big go at Chuka Umunna. And he says the Labour MPs like Chuka are using the row over anti-Semitism as a method to provide rocket fuel for a split in the party. And Umunna, in response, says he will not be bullied into silence. So, you see, there is really a proper, genuine civil war going on within the Labour Party right now, and I don't think belatedly accepting this IHRI definition of anti-Semitism, I personally don't believe it makes any difference at all. I think the damage is done, but tell me I'm wrong on 0345 6060 973. David is calling from Twickenham, and he's a new caller to this show. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Nigel. Great to talk to you. Thank you.
Not a bit. So,
yeah, I've maybe got a slightly different take on this to usual. I basically vote Tory these days, but I've always supported the human rights of the Palestinians. So those things, I don't think they're exclusive of those things at all. But basically, I found out in the last few days how terrible the anti-Semitic thing is on the left, and it's far worse than I thought. Because of my interest in the Palestinian thing, I was looking at two threads on Facebook. One of them was from George Galloway's page, and one of them was from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, which I am currently a member of. And these threads were all about Jeremy Corbyn. Did he lay the wreath? Did he not? Now, I was debating. I like a bit of cut and thrust and debate, and I was debating on there. And I was saying to people, look, if he laid a wreath to these horrific animals who committed that atrocity in '72, which I remember, I'm old enough to remember. Yes. I said, if he laid a wreath to that, that's completely outrageous. He has to leave. Now, do you know what? I couldn't on both those threads. Not only could I not get anyone to say that they would condemn him for having done that, I couldn't actually get anyone to condemn the actual terrible act of Munich itself. And
really?
The comments I got were absolutely unbelievable.
And did you receive, David, much personal abuse?
Well, endless personal abuse. And but all I kept getting was, look what Israel have done, you Zionists, this, and the names I was called. I mean, I would never say them on air, but even I was shocked. I like a bit of cut and thrust on Facebook. Yeah. But I couldn't believe it. And I kept saying to people, I said, look, I disagree with lots of the stuff Israel has done in intervening years, of course. But you can't say, well, Munich was okay because look what Israel have done. I said you can despise the people.
No, absolutely. So how have we got here, David? I mean, you've got a passion for this cause. You're interested. How have we got to the level where people who are supporting, or some people who are supporting the Palestinian cause, have become this extreme? How have we got here?
Well, I think they have, and it's crazy because I've always argued that supporting Palestinian human rights is absolutely not the same thing as not wanting Israel. I have, Nigel, I was going to go down that route of saying I've got Jewish friends, and it's so patronising, so I'm not going to say it. Right. But, these things are not. I can't stand lots of the stuff with Israel. In my view, Israel has done terrible, terrible things. That is not a criticism of Jewish people. It's a criticism of some policies of Israel.
But does it have a right to exist, David?
Of course.
Okay, fine. Because you see, there are some on the pro-Palestinian cause who don't think it has a right to exist, and actually some who think it should be exterminated completely. Well,
I thought there were a few people thought that, but then most people were sensible like me about it. But sadly, in reading Facebook the last few days, certainly the people on Facebook, which isn't everyone, I'm getting 100%. All I'm getting is, I despise Israel. I don't care what happened in Munich for what they've done. Jeremy Corbyn's fantastic. He hates them as well. You wouldn't believe it. So I'll tell you what. When people when the left says that this problem in Labour is exaggerated, it's a complete nonsense. It's absolutely underreported. In my view, it's absolutely despicable and a disgrace. And I'm fed up with it. And I'm going to leave the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. There may as well be people listening to this who run that or are involved with it right now. I'm not sharing a membership of something with the kind of people who said the things I've said. And that was on their thread, and not one person, presumably that's looked after by someone at that organisation, not one person has gone on there and said, hang on, of course our policy is to absolutely abhor any terrorist actions by Palestinians. No, they haven't.
David, I think you've laid the gauntlet down. If anybody from that or any other pro-Palestinian organisation wants to ring in and respond to what David in Twickenham has said, they please can do so on 0345 6060 973. David, thank you very much indeed for that call and contribution. Thank you. That was very, very, very powerful indeed. I get by text. Corbyn has already shown and demonstrated his true colours. Nothing he can say or do will prove otherwise. He's just paying lip service to his party, says Charles. On Twitter, this move by Corbyn is not out of sincerity, but out of a desire for power and to hold on to it. He is a man I don't want to see in number 10, says Chris. Chris, I know, and yet, over the course of this week, I've had plenty of you on the phone, who actually do think he is a great guy and he's done nothing wrong. On Facebook, I think Corbyn should stay. That would ensure Labour wouldn't win the next general election. Well, I think you're right, although don't underestimate the abilities of the Conservatives to split and cause themselves all sorts of difficulties. Let's go to Rochester in Kent and speak to Robert. Good evening.
Hello. Hello, Nigel. To be completely frank, I think the damage has been done. Labour have proven themselves to be just as bad as all the other political parties. And I think they should be labelled just as they've labelled every other political party out there as a racist party.
Yep.
And I just can't really put it in any other words.
Isn't it funny, Robert? Isn't it funny, Robert? So many of those activists around the Labour Party and around organisations that support the Labour Party, and I saw these people in the 2015 general election, they're very, very good at calling everybody else racist, aren't they?
Yes, 100%. And it's very difficult to sort of climb down from any sort of argument when you're being pushed into a corner of a criticism because you have a viewpoint that's slightly different from somebody else's, to kind of come across as even-minded and take in all the opinions. But it's very difficult to sort of convince anybody that is stonewalled, convinced that Jeremy Corbyn is some sort of messiah. That's the way it seems to be. But to be completely frank with this issue, I think the only way that the Labour Party can save itself is by axing their leader and shedding all of this nastiness out of them.
But it's not going to happen, Robert, is it?
No.
It isn't going to happen. No, they're stuck with it. They're stuck with him. And I have to say, Robert, I mean, I talked a little bit about this on Sunday, but I do think all of this makes the formation of a new centre party with new Labour figures, maybe a handful of Tories and Liberal Democrats. I think all of this makes that, to me now, I think almost a certainty that will be attempted.
It will be, but it will fail in the current climate.
Yes, and I also agree with that because, getting through the first past the post system, getting any real change in this country is very, very difficult. But I can never remember a time in my life when both parties were in such a crisis. Robert, thank you for your comments. Laurie on Facebook is coming to Jeremy Corbyn's rescue and support and saying he is one of the few honest men in politics. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's now 7:30. And I'm in America for a couple of days, and the story that is dominating everything, indeed, I think it's dominating most things back at home too, is, of course, the death today of Aretha Franklin. Here was Donald Trump paying tribute to her earlier on today.
She's brought joy to millions of lives, and her extraordinary legacy will thrive and inspire many generations to come. She was given a great gift from God, her voice, and she used it well. People loved Aretha.
That's one thing I don't think even CNN can criticise Donald Trump for. So that's the big story here in America. And a story that hasn't got a lot of attention, but perhaps ought to have done, is the British Medical Association, the BMA, this morning warning that a no-deal Brexit could increase the risk of a Europe-wide pandemic. So there you have it, folks. Brexit could now kill all of us. I mean, even compared to some of the things George Osborne said in the referendum, this is Project Fear on a whole new level. We saw it, in fact, on LBC a couple of weeks ago when someone rang up to say if we leave, there'll be no insulin in the country, only to find out a few hours later that we had factories that make insulin in our country. But this is now what we're getting. Quite why the BMA think that unless we're members of the European Union, unless we're governed by unelected bureaucrats from Luxembourg and goodness knows where else, that all civilised life ends, I do not know. I mean, is what the BMA is saying that the European Union is such an evil empire that if we needed a particular drug that was produced in Portugal, for argument's sake, they would forbid that drug to be sent to the United Kingdom and watch millions of us die. Is that actually what the British Medical Association is saying? Have they accepted that we're simply a colony of these new dictators? It's just utter nonsense. Look, we are leaving political union. We don't want to have our laws made somewhere else. We want to take back control of our borders. We want to stop wasting so much money. But we're going to go on doing business with Europe and trading with Europe and having holidays and all sorts of reciprocity. These really are just the most irresponsible scare stories. But of course, it's all building up. It's building up to an autumn as we head towards a big European summit on October the 18th and 19th, where the establishment will do their best to get Article 50 suspended. That is what this is all about. Oh, no. If Article 50 happens, if there's no deal, there'll be no drugs, no medicine, no doctors. It is complete and utter hooey. Back to Corbyn, back to the idea that he might make this humiliating climb down. He might well accept the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism, having previously not wanted to do so. Does that mean it'll all be over? Everything will be better and the rows in Labour will end? I genuinely don't think so. I wonder what Frank, a new caller to this show from Bellshill in Scotland, thinks. Frank, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. I don't see any solution to this problem for Corbyn and Labour, do you?
Well, Nigel, I just have a personal opinion of this. So I've been listening to your show for the last few nights, and you've gone on about Corbyn. Now, look, I think everyone in politics, including you, can be controversial.
Sure.
But having said that, I think the real reason you're hosting these shows is because I think you may be scared. And I know you're going to laugh now, but I think you're scared because I think all your life you've campaigned for Brexit. You've campaigned for the referendum, you got what you wanted, and now because of your actions, you may have landed up I'm not saying you will because God knows you can't predict anything in these times, but because of your lifelong actions, you might have landed up putting one of the hardest, you might inadvertently land up having contributed to putting one of the most hard left Labour governments in power should Corbyn come to power.
Well, I don't think so, Frank. I don't think so at all. Actually, I'd take the opposite view. I'd say that the success of the Brexit referendum meant that millions of people who'd gone to UKIP actually switched back to the Conservatives because they took the Brexit line. So if anything, the net effect of what I did helped the Conservative Party, ultimately. But anyway, back to the point, Frank. If he apologises, if he accepts his IHRA definition, does that solve Labour's problems?
I don't know if it solves their problems, but I'm all in favour of it. Anything that makes Britain a more inclusive society, I would be happy with it. But then again, with all due fairness, a lot of people would find what you've said about Europeans quite offensive over the years.
Like what?
You make it sound like we're all these...
What terrorist groups have I... Come on, Frank. What terrorist groups have I mixed with?
I never said you mixed with a terrorist group.
No.
But let me finish. I could have explained myself.
So what have I said that's really upset you?
Or not you. Maybe not you, but...
right.
Well, sometimes it sounds like people who come from Europe are these job-thieving, woman-grabbing, here to colonize us and breed us out of the country sort of thing. And I'm not saying maybe you've ever said these things, but sometimes inadvertently you could have helped these things along.
Well, Frank, I tell you what, if we'd maintained sensible border controls and maintained the same kind of immigration policy that we had from the late 1940s to the end of that, in fact, really, until Blair got to power, if we'd maintained that, this debate, Frank, would never have happened. Frank, I've got to get on. I know you want to talk about things more broadly, but I want to stick to Corbyn and the Labour Party, not what I might or might not have done in British politics. By text, I get, Nigel, I'm absolutely convinced that Corbyn will toe the party line to hold on to his position of power as leader of the Labour Party. Underneath all of that, I don't think he will ever change who he is. One other point. The hard left are quick to call people racist while brushing anti-Semitism off as a smear. The irony is shocking, says Vince in Exeter. Vince, one of the people in 2015, and she was outside almost every meeting I did down in Kent, screaming, holding up banners, abusing members of the public who wanted to come to these meetings, is now right at the heart of this big anti-Semitism row and is currently suspended from a Labour Party. They're very, very good at screaming racist to everybody else. And on Twitter, on the BMA story I just mentioned, Nigel, the BMA should be ashamed of themselves and are causing such distress to people who are ill and don't need any more stress. My oncologist says it's absolute rubbish. Stephen, it is absolute, total and utter rubbish. Right. Back to the callers, back to Corbyn, back to can he put this issue to bed? Can he bury this, what looks today to be deteriorating civil row that is going on within the Labour Party by accepting the IHRA definition of what anti-Semitism is? I wonder what Chris in Colchester makes of this. Chris, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Yeah, talking of Project Fear, I mean, this campaign against Corbyn is the most outrageous propaganda campaign I think I've ever seen. I was reading for the Daily Mail today, and it's just lunacy, really. I mean, I just don't see how calling a racist state racist is racist. That's just madness.
Chris, there are all sorts of debates we can have about policy and about, you know, how Israel might have behaved and what criticism of them is reasonable, and we can debate that. But Chris, you know, when you are the leader of the Labour Party, and you want to form the next government, and photographs appear, as the Times have pointed out today, of you standing next to and laying wreaths with leaders of terrorist organisations that commit murder, basically on religious grounds. Doesn't that just make it impossible for you to become the next Prime Minister?
Well, no, because they're also we have our leaders, Theresa May, selling weapons to Saudi Arabia, that are using carpet bombing Yemen, including a bus full of school children last week. That's terrorism. The only difference is when we do it or our allies do it, it's not called terrorism, it's called something else.
You know, I mean, we do sell arms to people, and we import arms from people too, of course. But Chris, but I've never seen a picture of Theresa May, you know, looking pleased to be with international terrorists. And there's a huge difference here, Chris. Corbyn's record of spending time with terrorist figures, you know, it's there, decade after decade after decade. Do you not see, Chris, why this is not a smear? This is actually a statement of fact that he does not pick his friends very, very wisely.
Well, I agree that he doesn't. I don't think he does himself favours, and I think he could have been more forceful. And I think the truth's on his side because he might naively do the wrong thing, but he does believe in peace and the Palestinian cause. But, you know, Israel's got a racial apartheid system, and he's against that because he was against apartheid South Africa. Did anyone say he was anti-white because he was obsessed with apartheid South Africa? What's the difference? You know, it's just madness. The thing is, Israel are going down a dark road with their policies. They're becoming more and more insane. And it's not just Netanyahu, it's the state. And, you know, they're soldiers giving each other high fives when they're killing people. And the Israeli population, 95% of them supported the last massacre in Gaza in 2014.
And they have to put up with suicide bombers. They have to put up with all sorts of things, Chris, don't they? They actually have to put up with neighbouring countries who want them obliterated and killed.
Well, they've attacked every country around them with the support of the United States, who are giving them $10 million a day.
But that's because, Chris, they are surrounded by countries that want to kill them all. Well, do you not understand? I mean, can't you see why, you know, Israel would? I mean, she may not have behaved perfectly at all times. I would agree with that. But, you know, look, Chris, we can find fault on both sides of this, all right? But Jeremy Corbyn hasn't just allied himself to a cause. He's allied himself to international terrorists. That, Chris, I think is the point.
Well, like I said, Israel carries out acts of terrorism.
We're talking about Jeremy Corbyn. I'm not talking about Israel. I'm not talking about apartheid. I'm talking about Jeremy Corbyn, who looks into the camera and wants to be our next Prime Minister. Chris, I don't think all of this evidence that we've seen, and much else that we've seen over the last few years, I don't think that makes him suitable. And I don't think that, I just don't believe this is solely a smear campaign.
Nigel, it is a smear campaign. People need to watch the Undercover Al Jazeera documentary about the Labour Party with the Israel lobby, with the guy from the Israel, what's it called? I forgot what it's called.
Don't matter, keep going.
So they were caught on tape trying to smear Jeremy Corbyn. Joan Ryan, who's been very critical this week, she was part and part of it. Chuka Umunna was in the video as well. They are trying to. It's the Israel lobby. They don't want Corbyn because he's a supporter of Palestinian rights. I know he's.
I think it's Chris. You've made the point in defence of Jeremy Corbyn very passionately, but I've got to tell you, it's a lot deeper than that, in my view. I've got to move on. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It is now 7:46. So Corbyn may well back down, yes, and he may well accept the International Holocaust Remembrance Association's definition of what anti-Semitism is. But will it make any difference? Is it too late? I think it's too late. Middle England, Middle Wales, Middle Scotland are appalled. They're appalled that he openly mixes with international terrorists. They're appalled that when he's called on it, he pretends, oh, well, I was there, but I wasn't really part of it. And it's just not good enough. I know some of you are coming on to defend him, but I've not yet heard an argument that convinces me that even if they do accept this definition, that this civil war in the Labour Party is going to end any time soon. Chris in Norbury's another who says, Corbyn is the reason I've left the Labour Party. He's a liability. Momentum will lead Labour to political wilderness. Chris, I absolutely think they will. On Twitter, nope. They've left it dragging on for so long. It's clear that it's only a cynical effort to save face rather than any genuine concern about anti-Semitic attitudes prospering in the party. And that is the view of Aidan. Let's go to Io, who's calling from Hackney. Good evening.
Right, Nigel. Now, the thing is, look, I've got a lot of friends. I'm from Hackney, obviously. I spent a lot of time with Dublin Hill. I've been on TV, on some other TV programmes. I've been all around the country. So I think I've got a good broad perspective. So on Facebook, I've got, 2 Facebook accounts, 5,000 each, and probably a lot of them are Labour supporters. Now, Nigel, the thing is, right, I don't see it. I don't see this anti-Semitism that people are going on about. I'm on Facebook quite a lot. Come and find me. You'll see my page on there. I'm on Twitter quite a lot. And I just do not see this anti-Semitism.
I tell you what, Io, I want to talk to you. The line is rotten. So we're going to get that sorted out. I'm going to move to Newham, just down the road, and speak to Mike. Mike, hi.
Hello, hiya. Are you there?
Yes, hi there. So, can he end this? Can he end this row, Mike? And can Labour move on?
Okay, I just want to make a couple of points. One, I don't think he's going to be able to move on from this because his opponents will not let him move on from this. I think a couple of things that we should all know is that Labour have accepted the definition. It's one example, which is the racist endeavour.
Now, this is of the if we're going to get technical on this, this is about whether it would be allowable under this definition to be critical of the existence of Israel, basically.
Yeah. And thing is, that denies Palestinian people and Jewish people to describe their own history, and I see it as a matter of free speech. I wouldn't describe it as that, but that's the fact. Now, the real important point is that this issue is being used by Corbyn's opponents, which include Blairites, Tories, and yes, the Israel lobby. You see how Netanyahu got involved. This is not about anti-Semitism. This is all about getting rid of Corbyn. And the thing is, it won't go away until Corbyn goes away. And Corbyn is not going to go away because he's strong and he's an anti-racist campaigner, and he'll be on the front line and he'll fight for people's rights. And
Mike, when you say that Corbyn is an anti-racist campaigner, that does sort of ring a little bit hollow when you look at some of the people he's photographed with.
Oh, like who?
Well, like terrorists who kill Jewish people. Hang on, who kill Jewish people for purely racist, ideological, religious reasons.
So what? Tick on. Be quite clear who's been photographed with, who's killed people.
Well, I tell you what, Mike. I tell you what. Have a look at today's Times. It's not the Daily Mail, it's the Times. Have a look at today's Times and you will see, standing immediately to the right of Jeremy Corbyn, at the wreath-laying ceremony in Tunisia back at the end of 2014, standing next to Corbyn, and the Times themselves have put a big red circle around this guy's picture. They've named him. He is Maher al-Taha, the leader in exile of the proscribed Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. They are a terrorist organisation that murder people. They even murdered a British rabbi. The point I'm making, Mike, is that, I mean, what on earth was he doing being photographed with people like that? He can't say he didn't know, surely.
Well, okay, let me tell you. If you want to do guilt by association, you'll find a picture of Jerry Adams with the Queen or with Prince Philip, What happens to these National Front liberations, like progress, there's struggles, and unfortunately there is violence.
Do you think, Mike... All right, let me ask you. Do you think Jeremy Corbyn, when he attended that ceremony, he tried to deny, of course, he'd been part of it, but when he attended that ceremony, do you think Jeremy Corbyn knew the kind of people he was mixing with?
I don't know. Honestly, don't know. But one thing I'm sure, that he was there, one thing only, for a matter of peace, and to make things better, and to recognise people's struggles that they happen.
If he wanted to do that, Mike, that's fine. He wouldn't have chosen to mix with terrorists, would he?
Who defines terrorists? Israel are a terrorist state. So is the US. So is Britain.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're all murderers. We're all dreadful. Yeah.
Well,
we're all dreadful, but Corbyn's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
All right, fine. I tell you what, Mike. Fine. You've said what you've got to say. I disagree with you 100%, but you've got the freedom to say it. Thank you. Well, Mike says we're all terrorist states, but Jezza, he is top dollar. Corbyn fanatics won't condemn his laying of a wreath for terrorists. Some won't even condemn the Munich attacks. And that was a point that was being made earlier on this show tonight, by a guy who actually been a member of some of the Palestinian support groups, although I think he's decided now he's pretty much had enough. On Twitter, Corbyn has ruined the Labour Party. He needs to go and go quickly. Christopher, he's not going anywhere. He's got the full support, particularly of the £3 members that Ed Miliband led into the Labour Party. I wonder how Ed's feeling about all this. We must get him on one day. Let's go to Alex, who's calling from Mill Hill and is a new caller to the show. Alex, good evening.
Hi, Nigel.
So, can this row be solved by accepting a new definition on anti-Semitism?
Absolutely not. And I'm going to give you a bit of historical perspective on this because I'm Jewish and there's a lot of fear in our community at the moment. I just want to give you a bit of historical context here because in the early 20th century, the Jewish people voted Labour en masse.
They did.
And this continued right up until the Blairite years. Even Tony Blair commanded about half the support of the Jewish community. Mm-hmm. Ever since Ed Miliband got in, that's when the numbers started going down. And there was a poll that came out recently, about a year or two ago, in the Jewish Chronicle, which said that 8% of Jewish people would vote Labour. I have to say, if they did a poll now, I think it would be down to 1%. We are terrified in the Jewish community if this man gets in.
And Alex, of course, isn't part of the problem here, and I'm not saying this out of pure cynicism, it's just arithmetic, that electorally, there just aren't many of you, are there?
That's absolutely correct. We only matter in a handful of constituencies. The constituency that I live is Hendon in northwest London.
Yep.
And in the recent council elections in Barnet, there was a big backlash amongst the Jewish community. Labour were expected to take control of the council.
Yeah. It did make a difference in Barnet, you're right, but the truth is, across the... I mean, how many Jewish voters are there in Britain? 250,000?
Yeah, about that, 250,000.
Yeah, about that. And you say that people are terrified. Genuinely, are people terrified of a Corbyn government?
Genuinely, 100% terrified.
Interesting. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Alex, and thank you all of you for your comments, thoughts and views this evening. What is clear to me is that those people that do support Jeremy Corbyn, boy, they absolutely support him and they're passionate with him. But I think more interestingly, are the callers, the texters, the tweeters, the Facebookers that we've had tonight of people who've been Labour supporters, people who've been Labour members, and they're actually withdrawing their membership and their support for the party because they cannot believe the direction that Jeremy Corbyn has taken it in. They cannot believe some of the friends that Jeremy Corbyn associates with. I think he's got a very, very real problem. I don't think he can solve it. I don't think at the NEC on the 4th of September accepting a new definition on anti-Semitism changes anything. Well, I'm so upset with the British Medical Association, I now have to have a very large drink. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I'll be back on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. At 10 tonight, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you.